Picture this. It's a summer's evening. The sun is low in the sky. The shadows are long on the ground. You're walking through the national park north of Goldenrod City, your Pokeballs on your belt. You're strolling around the fountain when you spot another person walking the other way, Pokeballs at their hip too. Your eyes meet. Want a battle? You say in unison. You send out your Yanma, they send out their Croconaw, and a brilliant battle ensues, with highs and lows and creamy middles until one Pokemon cannot continue. In the afterglow, you and your opponent, your new friend, sit on the grass listening to the fountain trickle, letting the sun set, smiles on your faces. Now picture this. It's a summer's evening. The sun is low in the sky, the shadows are long on the ground. You're walking around Victoria Park in East London, your dog's lead in your hand. You've just reached the Chinese pavilion when you see another person coming the other way, their dog's lead in their hand. Your eyes meet and you say, "Wanna let our dogs fight each other for money?" The other person calmly says no, and when they're out of ear and eye shot, they call the police. You are arrested. I am not the first person to make this comparison, nor will I be the last. Pokemon battles are basically dogfighting. It is two animals attacking each other until one can no longer continue, with the owner of the winning animal getting money from the owner of the losing animal. This being okay is a fundamental leap your brain must take for you to enjoy Pokemon in any way. If you cannot make this leap, the Pokemon franchise is not for you. Battling is such a foundational part of the Pokemon universe in any medium, game, anime, yes, even weird bizarro manga, that if you have a problem with it, you can't really engage with Pokemon as a whole. And yes, there are other aspects and views of Pokemon in each Pokemon world, and in our real world too. People like the idea of Pokemon just as pets, just cute little companions you can spoil and grow old with. People might like the idea of applying Pokemon abilities to societal and day-to-day problems. An Abra can teleport your post to you. There's Pokemon healthcare and Pokemon naturalism and Pokemon space exploration and Pokemon history. And those are all totally valid channels, but the battling is always still there. There will always be two people down the park having their animals attack each other for money. There will always be two trainers having a battle. If you don't like that, I'm talking to you, real world person, maybe give Pokemon a miss. But what if I wasn't talking to you, real world person? What if I was talking to someone who didn't like the idea of Pokemon battling, who unfortunately found themselves trapped within a Pokemon world, aka Yellow? In this video, I want to, on top of discussing all the places where Pokemon Adventures diverts from quote-unquote standard Pokemon, which is what this video series has been about, I want to, through the lens of our OC Yellow here in Pokemon Adventures manga number 5, cover pacifism in the Pokemon world, how it's talked about and how it's sort of worked around. First though, quick thoughts on the book. I expressed concerns in the last video in this series that the premise of this arc, Finding Red, might not be substantial enough to cover 4 whole books. Those concerns were well founded, it seems. It really isn't till the last chapter of this book that the plot progresses in any meaningful way. There are other characters doing things towards that progression, side characters getting their own little subplots. But Yellow themselves, the main character, finds himself on a very episodic adventure with not much changing between each chapter. Yes, they do have a pretty epic confrontation with the main villain, Lance, but one, that felt much more like Lance just feeling out his adversary than an actual climactic confrontation. And 2, it still didn't actually have anything to do with Finding Red. The last chapter, though, that I mentioned does set things up to have a pretty fast-paced next book, with 3 cities being attacked by literal armies of Pokemon, and Blaine Blue and Yellow sneaking into the enemy base. I'm more optimistic going into book 6, I think. But for the moment, book 5, a little slow. Though I do like Blue's sort of exasperated Piccolo role, training Yellow in the desert. It's quite funny. Oh, and we don't get any explanation for Yellow's fanfic superpowers that I mentioned in the last book. I am Waiting. Okay, pacifism. Up to a point, it was rare to find anyone in any Pokemon medium that objected to Pokemon battling. Yes, there were main NPCs and characters who didn't battle, like Bill and most of the Pokemon professors and Umberto, but none of them objected to battling. It's really something you never saw because it would undercut the premise of the entire franchise. That was until green-haired elephant in the room, N, and by extension, Team Plasma. Or at least what their sort of surface MO was, until it was revealed they were just going to take over the world or whatever. Team Plasma were the sort of the first major instance of people within a Pokemon world objecting to Pokemon training and battling. By training and battling Pokemon. Now, I would dismiss this hypocrisy with like, it's fine, don't worry about it. But it's actually kind of important here, because it allows them to still be presented as the villains despite their initial pacifistic goals, which you would think would put them on the right side of morality. Team Plasma want to liberate Pokemon from their trainers so they don't have to be subservient and fight for money. Pokemon should be wild and free and should not be captured. This mindset is further epitomized by the king or something, N. In case you can't tell, I'm not the biggest fan of this like holier-than-thou wet wipe, whose full name is Natural Harmonia Gropius. What? I can't really understand the fan obsession with him. It's the prettiness, isn't it? But is it also the pacifism? As I said, the idea of stopping Pokemon being used by trainers to battle should put Team Plasma and N on the right side of morality. And when someone is good and right, you kind of resonate with them more, especially when looking at Pokemon battling through the real-world comparison of dogfighting. But things get murky with N and Team Plasma. As I said, Team Plasma use Pokemon despite their goal to liberate Pokemon. And N was manipulated by his dad? Adopted dad, who just happens to have the exact same shade of green hair? Get this. N had only been put in contact with Pokemon that had had unhealthy relationships with people, thus colouring N's perception of all Pokemon's relationship with people, and thus undermining his overall outlook on people and Pokemon. This brings us to Yellow. Yellow does not like to hurt Pokemon. Yellow spends a whole night trying to catch a Caterpie because they don't want to use moves on it. They practice ways to catch Pokemon without battling them, and they only fight other Pokemon out of desperation to protect others or themselves. How does this mindset fare them on their journey to find the missing red? Well, it's hard to say because they don't really commit to it. It would be hard to have the protagonist of your action Pokemon manga not do any action. So they do, and they sort of just play lip service to Yellow's kinder nature after the fact. Attack a bunch of Mankey, but it's fine because we did like an empathic mind meld with the primate that was in charge of those Mankey later. Fight Team Rocket, but have it be presented as being more concerned with saving the people on the boat that Team Rocket were attacking. This is having your cake and eating it too, and I don't like it. The Elite Four villains in this, or at least Lance, have a similar outlook to N, though he just thinks Pokemon shouldn't be kept by anyone other than elite trainers. And then this outlook isn't put up against or challenged by Yellow's sort of unique semi-pacifistic outlook. I think there could have been a really interesting dynamic here, but instead it's sort of just overridden by the power of friendship and all that. It's a lot of muddled, missed opportunities. Right, let's get to the running theme of this video series, where the Pokemon Adventures manga takes the tropes and norms of the Pokemon franchise and throws them in a blender. Nicknames. I remember just how big of a deal it was when Richie showed up in the Pokemon anime with Pokemon with nicknames. Dude had a Charmander called Zippo, like a lighter. How boss is that? Obviously, they've been in the game since the very beginning. Fun fact, I called my first ever Pokemon, Bulbasaur in Pokemon Blue, Bud, with 2 Ds, because I didn't know how to confirm the nickname. So just pressed A again when I was done, whilst the cursor was still over the letter D, then realised you had to press start. But nicknames in the anime are exceedingly rare. They are not so in Pokemon Adventures, but they are not very creative. Yellow has a Pikachu called Pika, though this one was nicknamed by Red. A Raticate called Ratty. A Doduo called Dodie. A Graveler called Gravy, though I'd love if it was actually pronounced Gravy. an Omanyte called Omni Negate, and maybe the most creative of the bunch, a Caterpie called Kitty, because cat, hang on, that implies the presence of real world. Don't think about that. Stopping evolution. To stop an evolution, you press B on the evolution screen, or you mash B just to make sure. Well, did you know that according to Pokemon Adventures, that is actually your character pressing a button on the Pokédex to stop the evolution? I guess if you don't have a Pokédex and you don't want your small, manageable Magikarp to become an enormous, financially crippling Gyarados, you're out of luck. Staying on the topic of the Pokédex, did you know that you could shoot a Porygon from one Pokédex to another? Well, you can. What is this, trading? Or, like, shrug internet? Wearing Pokemon comes back. Brock is wearing a weird ring of tiny little Geodude for some reason. I don't really know why. It doesn't really do anything. Is it like a shield? The good old HH Ball returns. I understand that Ultra Balls are called Hyper Balls in Japan, which is why they have that big yellow H on them. But what is this little H for? Is this a Hyper Ball? We get introed here to 4 special evolutionary stones that don't get used up on use. This is a pretty cool idea that ties back to Red's Eevee that can evolve into one evolution, then turn back into Eevee, and then turn into a different evolution, and then repeat the process whenever it needs to. And then in the process of these special stones being introduced, we get a retcon. Retcons are rare in Pokemon, though I suppose the introduction of every region, especially in something like the anime, kind of is a retcon because it hadn't been invented yet. So when, say, Ash was knocking about Johto, Hoenn hadn't been invented yet, right? So it's not there, but then by the end of the series it was there, and it's not presented as a whole region that had just been discovered, because it's like a first world nation with technology and a whole load of people. So it's like it was there the whole time and they just never mentioned it. It sort of retconned its way into existence. The retcon here, though, is Red's Poliwhirl evolving into Poliwrath. It turns out it didn't evolve then just because the writers felt like it was a cool time for Poliwhirl to evolve into Poliwrath and they forgot about it requiring a water stone. It's actually because one of these special evolutionary stones was actually at the bottom of the body of water in which Poliwhirl evolved. Nice one, guys. Clean surnames. How many surnames do you see in Pokemon? Ash and his mum, or Ketchum's? The professors, obviously. And by extension, Gary and Daisy Oak. Tracy's surname is Sketchit, and Todd's surname is Snap, because of course they are. Now we can add Yellow to that small list with their surname, Caballero. Caballero, you know. I will be gutted if in the next arc Gold's surname isn't Arizabalaga. Have you ever seen a Hitmonlee do this? Or this? You haven't. And did you ever wonder where the surfboard for a surfing Pikachu comes from? Well, Pokemon Adventures is here to tell you that is actually the energy that the Pikachu uses to do the move Substitute, but instead of the energy turning into a second Pikachu, it turns into the shape of a surfboard. A simple answer to the question. Oh, and we'll just end on the complete destruction of Vermilion City. Lance blows up an entire city. How many people die here? Thousands? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? That's a lot of dead, innocent people for Pokemon. Not very pacifistic at all. Pacifism in Pokemon is hard. Because, as I've mentioned 100 times now, Pokemon battling is intrinsically linked to the spine of the whole franchise. It would be possible, and probably quite cool, to see a cozy slice of life story told within a Pokemon world. And Pokemon pacifism absolutely would work there, but that's not what the games are, that's not what the anime is, and that's certainly not what the Pokemon Adventures manga is. They are action-based, they are combat-based, they are battling-based. I don't think it's really possible to execute a pacifistic character, especially a main character, in something like that unless you commit to it fully. They did not do so here with Yellow, and so when it does pop up here, it kind of just makes it feel cheap and hollow.
Hello, thanks a lot for getting to the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Yes, my Christmas tree is supposed to look like this. It is postmodern, it is Art Deco. Halfway through this section of Pokemon Adventures, 2 more books to go in this series, then we'll give it a break. Next video, movie, I think. Yeah, I think movie, because of the fridge. Yeah, movie.